Good afternoon, colleagues. If we can take our seats, we can start. We have very limited time today, so we need to be out of this room by 5 o'clock. There's another meeting in this room. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, parties and observers, to the second session of the second meeting under the ad hoc work program on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. As you will recall, we had our first session on the second meeting under the ad hoc work program on Wednesday, and this continued on Thursday so that we could complete all the speakers list. Parties provided us with very helpful suggestions on how we could simplify the input paper so that it becomes much more readable. Based on your guidance, we updated the input paper by removing duplications and factual statements. However, we also recognize that there is still potential for further shortening of the text. For example, some options look like duplications or factual statements, but we did not remove them as we felt that they differ in slight nuances. Many of these issues in our new paper have been grouped at the bottom of each of the subsections that you have before you. Furthermore, we note that we did receive submissions that were made by two parties and groups of parties. We heard from parties that some options were not captured in the input paper. However, it is not our intention to incorporate these in this version of the text, but rather to use this time available for us here in Bonn to further streamline and clean up the text. We will, after this session, depending on the outcome of this session, give you our intention for what we do on Monday and Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we will give you guidance as to how we intend going forward till the third meeting. So colleagues, rest assured, the co-chairs have a plan. We know what we are going to do. We know what we intend doing, but it depends on how the parties react. That will determine the course of action that we take. For today, what I'd like to hear from you are your views on guidance on how we can further clean up the updated input paper. We ask you to be precise, focused. Given the time constraints that we have, we'd like to make sure that we clean the speakers list today. Our intention is that we want to, at the end of this session, be in a position to be able to update the version of the input paper so that we can use the remaining time on Monday and Tuesday for us to engage on substantive matters of the document. With that, I'd like to open the floor. And colleagues, please, I do know that I will not tell you what to intervene. We have heard all your submissions before, your views before, on matters relating to mandates, whether it's the convention, Paris alignment, and that. There's no need to repeat that. Try and keep your interventions focused on what we are looking for. With that, the floor is open, and I see G77, Argentina, on behalf of G77.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I'm making this brief intervention on behalf of G77 and China. First of all, we would like to thank you both for your work on this document. Going from 63 to 45 pages is a substantial improvement. We do recognize, however, that further work is required to make it suitable for our negotiating purposes. For that, for example, we consider important to go to move from ideas or conceptual ideas to concrete text. Secondly, something that is very important for us, because we deem it as extremely helpful in our negotiating process and something we would like to leave the SBs with, is clarity on how you, the co-chairs, see the way forward. It would be extremely useful or helpful for all of us to know how you foresee the road from here to Baku, so as to know what to expect. Having said that, I would like to reiterate or to remind us all of the urgency of the situation we are going through. We are not talking about potential damages and losses. The impacts of climate change are being felt now. At this very session, at this meeting, a member of our group told us how an entire community had to be reallocated from their island because of rising sea levels. And that is, unfortunately and sadly, one of many stories we can tell from the regions of our group. And I didn't want to finish this intervention without recalling the urgency of what we are doing. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Thank you very much, Argentina, on behalf of the G77. I have next on my list New Zealand.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. And it's nice to see everyone again here this afternoon. Seen many people looking very good in pink as well. Yes, it's good to be here and agree with our colleague from the G77 that the document is a significant improvement. It's shortened. This is great. You know, the mandate for this year was very clear. It's a process of iterative development that we're going into. And so we're pleased that this is indeed what we're doing. So the document is definitely a step forward. But I think, and I'm not alone, as clearly mentioned by the G77 coordinator, that it's still very difficult to see us negotiating on the basis of this text, the length, the overlapping options, even if there is less duplication. And yeah, it is a bit frustrating, I mean, because we know how important this work is, you know, that we really do need to be getting to discussions on formulations and converging on a goal that can help us drive up the scale of finance that Article 2 of the Paris Agreement requires of us. And we're not yet doing that. So I share the frustration with those who feel that way. But we're here in Bonn to work. I certainly came here from a long way away to work. And we have full trust in the co-chairs with this process that you're running. And we know that this document is a basis for discussion, doesn't have a special status, and that you understand where we need to get to. And so it will be interesting to hear your response to the question from G77 about the way forward. But here today and work on this document, you know, we can streamline this document further. And while there's not a lot of pure duplication left, so thank you for removing that, you know, there are some that have substance and then very small elements of variation. But I think to take that next step forward, we need to be willing to take that next step in the streamlining, to take away those that go a little bit beyond pure duplication, not stripping away core positions or anything of parties, but just taking that next step forward. And so I have some concrete suggestions on how to do that. Firstly, removing paragraphs that present sort of generalized content or examples of what the text should have, but that have those elements actually represented in more detail in other paragraphs that better and more comprehensively reflect the view of those parties. So for example, paragraph 137 just sort of talks about a goal with quantitative and qualitative elements. It's a very valid view, but we have many examples of that in other paragraphs in the text. And so we wouldn't need that particular paragraph 137 that describes that, because other paragraphs show it. Another approach is to remove duplication where the only difference is a positional statement or opinion that is in fact covered and represented by multiple options elsewhere. You know, an example is paragraphs 447 and 448. They both talk about the ETF as being central, and really the only difference is that one has parentheses noting the idea of finance from developed to developing countries. I don't think we need both of those paragraphs. That idea in parentheses is very well captured throughout the document. So again, those could be streamlined as an example of that approach. The third and final approach that I would also suggest is, again, removing statements that are simply opinions about the goal, where that opinion is reflected in options and paragraphs in the text. Example, paragraph 401, the NCG is about sending policy signals to parties and other players. I very much agree with that. That's very much part of the vision we have for the goal, but it would be fine to see that paragraph removed because we see examples of that fleshed out through the structure section and other paragraphs of the text. So those are just some approaches for how to streamline and some examples of how to do it. There'd be many more examples that I'm sure you and the team will be able to find. So thank you for the version. It's definitely an improvement, but there's a long way to go. And as much as I'd hate to see you working tomorrow on Sunday, I would quite like to see another version for Monday. I think that would put us in a much more stronger position to have those substantive discussions that I think we all want to get to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. New Zealand, I have next Samoa on behalf of AOSIS.
Thanks, Co-Chair, and good day to colleagues. SIDS saw value in having a more inclusive and participatory process for setting the goal. In Glasgow, we finally agreed to a process that would not only involve just developed countries and big emerging economies, as we saw in 2009 and 2010, with the $100 billion a year goal. However, the discussions have been primarily dominated by two bigger narratives that have taken up all the oxygen. First of all, developed countries want an expanded contributor base, whether it is for looking at business cases for more funds, or looking at how a dispersal potentially of how the context of accountability is done. Then on the next side, you have bigger emerging economies that are either combating this contributor-based argument and or trying to ensure that there's no realized prioritization of specific subgroups of developing countries. SIDS and LDCs remain caught in the middle of this geopolitical knife fight where elephants are fighting and the grass is suffering. And we use this phrase a lot, but this is really happening in this room. SIDS' interest in the NCQG include obviously our ability to fully adapt to climate change and address loss and damage. And we require that those needs to be fully financed in an urgent manner on a grant and highly concessional terms. But it is also in SIDS' interest for the limiting of global warming to 1.5 degrees and for emerging economies to get good quality finance to transition on the mitigation front as well as to become climate resilient. We want to begin to expand on these elements. It appears that some are treating this exercise as a really great game. AOSIS has made a submission ahead of this AWP, and we thought that we would be including options into a text in order for us to further develop this quote-unquote substantive framework. And it was even mentioned in page 5 of the Co-Chair's 2024 work plan that textual proposals for the options will be elaborated with a view for developing the substantive framework. And we understand and we hear the plans of the Co-Chair on that. But we do want to say that while the co-chairs have highlighted in their updated paper that it's not exhaustive, as well as has no status, we have to remind colleagues that even the title of the paper at this point is about inputs. So colleagues, it's June, and we understand that a way forward is needed. And we appreciate hearing what the co-chair is saying, that the way forward will be provided to us at the end of this session, and we'll know at the end of Tuesday as well. But the text, at least what we're finding, will never be readable if it conflates ideas that are premised on different understandings. And the only streamlining that would be of any use right now is to divide out the text into the different options, and then add the AOSIS option as a distinct option on its own, because right now, currently, this inputs paper that is supposed to be reflecting our views does not reflect AOSIS views. I realize that it may be unlikely, but the streaming exercise is otherwise a waste of time at this point, and it appears to be a delay on the work. Thanks a lot, Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, AOSIS. I have Russian Federation.
Dear co-chairs, we appreciate the work done by the Secretariat. We thank for sharing the second draft of input paper. We highly appreciate including some of our suggestions in input paper. Despite the document includes many valuable ideas, the input paper is trying to solve too many different problems, which are not connected with NCQG directly. Furthermore, we still have too many options in the input paper, which makes it difficult to reach consensus on the main issues. So our proposal is to concentrate only on NCQG. The role of NCQG is to implement principle of Article 9 of Paris Agreement. We support ideas in para 11 of the input paper that the NCQG must be in accordance with Paris Agreement and provisions of the Convention. At the same time, we should avoid in NCQG document cross-references to Article 2 of Paris Agreement. For example, we have references to Article 2 as well as 2.1c of Paris Agreement in para 12, 15, 84, 90, and some other articles of input paper, and we suggest to delete these cross-references. In order to justify such position, we should clearly distinguish NCQG as a form of international support from developed countries to developing countries, in accordance with Article 9. Financial flows in Article 2.1c of Paris Agreement are different by the nature. We agree that NCQG is actually a mechanism to scale financial flows to climate projects. Nevertheless, the logic of input paper should be just fixing some qualitative and qualitative characteristics and legal obligations. Wishes, despite the fact that we share some of them, are not the subject of legal agreement, and we should avoid them. So we suggest to exclude mentioned trillions and exclude articles 37, 48, 64, 84, 90, and some others which create some legal difficulties. In that logic, we strongly suggest to exclude articles 162, 206, and 418, which mention some initiatives about fossil fuels. Such initiatives about fossil fuels are not connected with NCQG, neither directly or indirectly. We also do not understand why in NCQG document we have proposals about debt for climate swaps. We suggest to delete this initiative in Article 162, subpoint C. Such swap instruments could be used on bilateral agreement conditions, and you know we have some examples of bilateral swaps, but artificially restructuring of debt should be discussed in other forum, maybe in Paris Club or other creditors. So definitely we ask to exclude 162C. We also believe that NCQG should be easy and transparent. We have many discussions previously about whether $100 billion goal was reached or not. So new NCQG should be simple and concrete. We suggest to exclude any mention about multi-layer goals because of difficulty with transparency, as well as such interpretation does not correspond to Paris Agreement language. So concretely, we suggest to delete articles 161, 162, 163, 164, 171, 173, 2001, 454. We will submit it in writing as well. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Russian Federation. I have now the LDCs.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The LDCs would, from the outset, want to align ourselves with G77 and China and AOSIS on behalf of SAOMA. We would want to thank you for your diligent work and for the new iteration of this new text. We appreciate the efforts you made to produce a slightly more concise document. However, for our group, we think the text remains challenging to work with due to its considerable length and complexity. That said, we can't wait to hear your plan on the next step, as we anticipate that we would get to have more clarity regarding the next steps for this session and towards the third meeting of the ad hoc work program. So in this context, we would like to have more clarity regarding how you foresee the inclusion of missing or refined positions or elements into the text undergoing streamlining. For us, we are of the view that a shorter, better structured document could make engagement more productive. However, we see further streamlining challenges as refined views from parties who are particularly vulnerable to the impacts and are at the front line of the climate crisis are presently having refined views that are missing in this text. So on potential approach, we see would be to streamline the text currently in the form of statements or expressing expectations of outcome. However, this should only proceed if other paragraphs are clearly reflecting or translating these statements or expectations into operational text. And finally, with or without streamlining in this session, we expect to be able to insert missing or additional refined views to the substantive framework document as the text evolves and takes shape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have ILAC.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Colombia is speaking on behalf of ILAC, and we fully align with the statement made by Argentina on behalf of the G77 and China. Co-chairs, what we hear at the table, and every time a developing country speaks, is that we need urgency. There's an urgency of action. And we, the developing countries, and all of us, are being burned by the flame of indifference, of those that care very little about us, and that are demonstrating this in every single time we came to the room. Right now, climate finance is not flowing to our countries. The NCQG is for developing countries. It does not include developing countries. It's for developing countries. These are two completely different discussions. We see, and we would like to be also seeing two headline figures, which is one of provision and one of mobilization. We are not talking about this enough. This is critical for us, and we want to see it. Also, we want to be talking about quality of finance and access. Now, co-chairs, thank you very much for your efforts trying to streamline this text. We still believe that it is very hard to navigate, to read, and to engage with. And we need to move a little bit faster if we are to have an outcome in COP29. We see further opportunities for streamlining, start collapsing also the different elements so that we start having a more clean text with which we can engage in. On our part, also, we would like to echo the question that was raised on behalf of us on what and how the co-chairs are also seeing the process from now on. We believe also that we have to work on the statement of facts and proceed on eliminating those that are not already contained in other elements of the document. There are some subtitles, such as when we go to different sections, such as section, give me 1 second, I'm going through the text, in which we feel the subtitles are confusing. So when we are talking about qualitative elements, so there are different proposals of options that the co-chairs are including there that require more clarity on. And also to be able to avoid existing repetitions that still persist there. What we see for the end of this session is to have a document with options, so that we can move forward in the future, in the next ad hoc work program meeting, and be able to elaborate more on what's inside of this text. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colombia, on behalf of ILAC. Next I have is Norway.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And like others, we've seen the improvement of the text, although I must note it was also made shorter because the explanatory introduction by the co-chairs has also been removed, so we note that. Well, the document is difficult to work with in its current format, so let me also allow myself to have a few comments to the text. I think it's helpful that the preamble text is reorganized. It included a confusing heading with issues where preamble, context were together. So we retain our view that the preamble section should be short and factual. It includes a lot of small variations on recalling paragraphs, and we think there is room for further streamlining here. Another general comment are to the statement of facts, duplicating elements in other paragraphs. I think LDCs and others have mentioned this. So for us, it's important that we not lose the substantive elements, but if these statements can be moved or merged, we are open to that. The context section is very long. In our understanding, this section should describe and frame the issues at hand, and this will be responded to in the more operative parts longer down in the text. So I think with that in mind, some more streamlining could also be done in this section. We note that the time frame has moved into structure. We think that makes sense. And like others, I think what we are looking at now is a version that takes one step further and describes option a bit more in detail, but we need to be really careful not to streamline parties' positions away. I think also the sentiment from other speakers so far is that we need to move away into discussion more on substance. Like colleagues from OSIS and others have said, we need to move from process to substance. And we started this week with a TED, and with the aim to facilitate an understanding of different views and concepts. And I think there was value in this. And I think for many of us, we still feel the need to explain why we need a multi-layer approach, why that is what we think that is most needed to really face the challenges we are up against to reach mitigation and adaptation outcomes, and also discuss the quality of finance, like my colleague from OSIS mentioned. So I think picking up this globe again next week is helpful, a more structured way for us to engage with the text. It's hard to engage now going section by section, but if we could come prepared to discuss where we see common elements in each section, which elements that we need clarification questions to, the misunderstandings, sort of building up some of the ideas that we had in the TED. And I encourage you as co-chairs to work with us and inform us for a next discussion on Monday, maybe with a little bit different approach, so that we really can make some progress next week here. Like others have said, we need a better product, but we also have great trust in you as co-chairs. You know our positions well, and we also trust that you are able to organize a material in a much better way and to produce a shorter version already at this section, at this meeting, but at least for the next meeting in Baku in October. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norway. Next, I have on my list AGN.
Thank you so much, co-chair, and again, thanking you and your co-chair for the shorter version of the text. And as I said in the last meeting, we know how the process moves. We have been in this process for quite some years, and we know that things takes time. So different parties acknowledge and move forward with the issue. From the AGM point of view, I have 3 points. The first one is it seems that we are missing what we are trying to do. It is new quantified goal. If you look at where the goal is, where is the quantum, you have only 1% of this text talks about a goal. The rest talks about narratives and too many things that were there. And you can easily identify this. Just do a very simple search on the figure. We are not really discussing the goal. We are discussing everything around the goal, and then the goal comes as 1%. So in your streamlining that we expect you to do, you need to keep in mind two things. The first one is the focus. I mean, the mandate that we have, we can discuss anything under the sun, under other agenda items, but the goal is not part of a discussion anywhere else. So this is a focus of our discussion. The second point is that we don't have balance between the different sections. So in some elements, in some sections, you have 4 paragraphs. In other sections, you have 15 or 20 paragraphs. So even in the streamlining, which we expect you to do, please consider that. So those sections were very short in nature, and they shouldn't be streamlined to be even shorter, while the other sections will be streamlined and stay longer. So in the streamlining, please consider this point. The second point is that when we discuss the elements, I think where we are focusing on as AGN, what we should be revolving around is the 1.3 trillion that was put forward by developing countries, and how we are going to deliver on this 1.3 trillion. And not discussing everything that deals with finance, including issues that are happening outside of this process, issues that we don't have a control on, and issues that are not even part of the Paris Agreement mandates and principles. A third point is that I'm afraid that, in a way, we are privatizing climate finance through the NCQG, if I look at the document now. I mean, we are shifting into investment goal, private sector delivering X, Y, Z. This is not part in any way or form that we have seen in the Paris Agreement. Not even in Article 9.2. And I mean, we haven't seen a privatization of the climate finance, as many of those elements that we have in this text is reflecting. So we are not here through the NCQG process to shift the climate finance from being a responsibility of those who should be providing to those who should be benefiting to deliver on their NDCs, to be a process to allow for investments from private sector that is profit-making, that is focusing on bankable projects, that really does not allow for the inclusive process for delivery on climate finance. Third point is, again, on the transparency part, it seems that there is a point that is missing. Most of the transparency component revolves around the ETFs. And the African group was very clear that it is not only about ETFs, it is ETF plus 9.5. And this only will happen if we stick to Article 9 of the Paris Agreement. If you go beyond Article 9 in discussing other sources and discussing other processes, then our base is not the ETF. So just to be clear, in when you do the streamlining, that ETF is an option related to part of the agreement. If we have an agreement there, that we are sticking to Article 9. If we're going beyond Article 9, then we will be providing something totally different and enhanced transparency mechanism. Final point is on the process. And we are fine that you will be refining, and we can give you the mandate to streamline and refine that. And I think on submissions should now at least focus on what is missing in the text. So if groups think there is something missing in the text, then they can submit on what is missing from their point of view and highlight that this element was missing in the text. Because otherwise, in a way, we are creating a parallel process where we have two texts. One text coming from you co-chairs trying to streamline, and other texts coming from parties and groups that is having that will be creating a parallel process. And that then, I don't know how the co-chairs are going to deliver on that. If we bring you texts that might have new ideas or should have new ideas, it's fine because it could be included. But text that reflects elements that are there, then it will be a challenge for all of us. And we need also clarity on the process, as others have mentioned, because if we are going into a submission process, the African group has a submission that is already ready to submit, and we will be doing that if we allow for a submission process. Although we want to avoid this two or duplicated process where you have two parallel texts, one is an option one is an option 2 as text, total text. Rather, we want to see these options reflected in one text that we will be working on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, African Group. Next I have is Australia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, co-facilitators, and thank you for this updated document. We really appreciate all the time that you and the Secretariat have put into developing it. I'd like to say, first of all, everyone looks marvellous in their pink. And I'd like to personally extend my thanks to every woman who sat in one of these chairs before me and all of the people around the table who are genuine champions for climate action and gender equality. We talk about common purpose, and I think gender equality is one of those ones that helps us to speak outside of our constituencies. But there is more than that that does combine us, and advancing climate action is one of those things that brings us all to the table. And so just in reflecting on this input paper that we have, and whilst the conversations over the last few days have revealed that there are very significant divergences in how we are thinking about this, when I look at this input paper, I see that there is a lot that could potentially bring us together. I can see areas where there could be areas of commonality that we could try to draw out over the course of time while we are here in Bonn. And I would like us to be able to actually speak to that substance. And so with that in mind, I have done my homework, Fiona and Zahir, and I have got some targeted streamlined suggestions as to how we could do that in order to streamline the document further. But I hope that the product that takes us into Monday will enable us to talk about substance, because we need to do that while we're here. And I'd like to echo the points made by IOSIS on this. We shouldn't just be talking about the things that divide us, but we should be seeking to find that common ground where we can move the process forward. Because I actually think there's quite a bit in this paper that we could start to agree upon, or at least better understand each other upon, because I don't actually think everything in here is contested. And I think there is possibly areas that we could start to move together. So, with that in mind, I have 3 suggestions for streamlining. And the first is one which was made by my colleagues from the LDCs already, which is the removal of statements of expectations on the NCQG generally, especially where those proposals and paragraphs are already operationalised in other elements of the text. So just one example of this, for example, is paragraph 34 in the context section, which speaks to the overall vision for the goal, but I think all of the things which are listed in paragraph 34 and its sub-elements are actually already covered elsewhere in the text. I still think there is some room for reducing duplication, though thank you, I think you've done a very good job of doing most of that already. And I've got a few examples of this where it could be further reduced and streamlined, and I think my colleague from New Zealand made some good suggestions to this effect as well. Is in the section on context, for example, paragraph 15, which speaks to both the goals speaking to Article 2.1c and 9.3, that's already covered in paragraph 2. And so paragraph 15, for example, could be deleted. And that's me making a suggestion on an element which I care about a lot, but I could see being streamlined to reduce duplication. In that same section, I see duplication between paragraph 11 and paragraph 19. I also think paragraph 60, 61 and 65 also say the same things, speaking to the urgency of climate action, and could be streamlined together into one option. There are also some outliers across the document which I think need to be reshuffled still. For example, paragraph 221, which talks about connections to other processes. I don't think that fits in the element of the text which belongs to thematic scope. That element probably actually could be deleted because the elements which it refers to and processes which it refers to are already covered under review, timeframe, ambition, and context sections. I do want to respond to some suggestions made to streamlining made by some of my colleagues. In particular, I think there was a suggestion from the G77, and I'm sorry if I've misattributed that, to start talking about how you transform some of the more statements into text. I don't think we're quite there yet. I also don't think we have time to do that. That's quite a lengthy exercise, and if we want a product ahead of Monday, that might not be the best way to use the resources of the Secretariat. I would suggest that it might be useful just to talk about the substance within those elements, rather than getting to a point where we're talking about the framing and the phrasing. It'd be more constructive to talk about the actual substance itself and the ideas that sit behind them. So co-facilitators, co-chairs, I hope with that advice you'll be able to streamline further and come back to us with a way to help us structure our discussions so we aren't just talking about the big elements, but where we divulge, but trying to find space for us to talk about the elements where we could find enhanced commonalities and ensuring all elements have adequate space and time to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. I now have the floor. Arab Group, Saudi Arabia.
Thanks, Co-Chair. I have the pleasure of speaking on behalf of the Arab Group. At the outset, we'd like to align ourselves with the statement made by Argentina on behalf of the G77 in China. We'd like to make two kind of process points before getting into to our intervention. At the outset, we think that we need a larger room for this meeting. I know we had the plenary last time. And I did witness, as I was coming in, observers being denied to coming into the room. So we just want to make sure that there's visibility on the discussions that are happening here. Also would like to note concern that the webcast is only on the UNFCCC website, it's not on YouTube. We think that that limits the accessibility to the meetings, and we think it should be inclusive and people have the right to listen to these important conversations that we're having here today. I think just to react to some proposals that have been made, we want to keep the recalling paragraphs, the recalling elements, those that are in the preamble. These are standard in any decision. And so because we're talking about a decision, a draft negotiation framework or whatever it may be, still that's relevant and needs to be maintained. On streamlining, what we're going to focus our intervention on today is just elements that were removed that we think should have been retained because there were distinct ideas. The first one is reflecting the undelivered amounts of the USD 100 billion. Our group has pushed for considering the arrears of the 100 billion for the past 2 years, and now that's been removed entirely from the text, and we would like it to be reinserted. A second point is we want to note that our time frame suggestions of 5 years have been moved from the time frame section and integrated only in the quantum section. But if we're going to have separate quantum and time frame sections, then our clear 5-year time frame has to be reflected, which is 2025 to 2029. A single layered approach, the single layer versus as an option has been removed. That needs to be reinstated as well. The idea that we don't want to create additional barriers for accessing resources has also been removed and would like to be reinstated. These are not duplications. We've searched the text. These are distinct ideas that have been deleted. And as I recall, the mandate of the co-chairs was to remove only redundant elements, not distinct ideas. And for us, it's very key, particularly for the 100 billion arrears, to be a very key part of the discussion that we're having here, given that this is the continuation of the 100 billion commitment, an extension of that, and that needs to be reflected in that context. That's for the streamlining. We also, as similar to others, give you a mandate to do further streamlining. We want to note that we provided in writing guidance to the co-chairs on our ideas of how streamlining should happen and occur, and these are still active. So we don't want to repeat those in our intervention, but we've sent those to you in writing, and our principles, ideas, approaches, suggestions remain the same. On structure of the input document, we took a step back, looked at the structure, and we noticed that there are some things that need to be rearranged. The first one, on the preamble, we'd like to maintain it. On the context, we need to combine the elements of urgency of action, needs and priorities, and ambition into one subsection. These are all linked discussions. Urgency of action, needs and priorities, and ambition should be combined. We need to move the disenablers to the qualitative section because that's where they're substantively explored rather than the context section. These disenablers need to be addressed. Developing countries have been very clear about this. If they're in the context section, they're not going to be actioned, it's just going to be referenced. So I don't think the suggestions from developing countries has been to, let's note that there have been disenablers in the context and leave it at that. The call has been clearly that we want these disenablers to be addressed. So we'd like to move all the elements on disenablers only in the qualitative section. Access for us is a standalone item. The development and climate nexus, we think that belongs in the qualitative section. Principles for us is a standalone element, not in the context. We need to change the framing of lessons learned from the 100 billion to just the 100 billion. USD 100 billion commitment, because partially we are covering lessons learned. Another element we're covering is progress on the delivery. Another element that we're covering is the arrears of the 100 billion. So that should be the title, the subtitle has to change to be generally about the 100 billion. On structure, and here's our very key suggestion here. And you asked for targeted suggestions, so we'll be as targeted as possible. On structure, we suggest combining structure, time frame, and quantitative elements together in one section. And this would be the top line NCQG. And it would include options, such as, for example, X trillion from X to X, from year X to X. That's one option. This is the top line goal. We need to also add, under that there are some discussions of sub-goals, sub-approaches. Those, we can separate that section into a top line, and then also, if there are other sub-goals and sub-elements, a sub-element subsection as well. My colleague with us in the group is new to negotiations, and he was looking at the document, the input document, and he asked me, he's like, isn't this agenda item the new collective quantified goal? Where's the new collective quantified goal? It discusses everything except that. So, and we are splitting the new collective quantified goal into different sections in a way that's convoluted and complex. And for us, it's hiding the real discussion. Time frame is part of that goal. Structure is part of that goal. Quantum is part of that goal. Contributors is part of that goal. It's not a standalone element. So we would like to combine the quantitative elements, the structure, and the time frame all together. Moving on, we'd like to delete how to determine the quantum. Again, we are now moving towards putting the quantum on the table. How to determine it is an old conversation that we used to have in the TEDs, in TED 2, TED 3, TED 4. Now we've done 10 technical expert dialogues, and we're in the second meeting out of 3 meetings of the ad hoc work program before we have to decide on the goal. This element is no longer relevant. Contributors would like to delete this element. It's outside of the mandate. It has no place in the discussion. For sources and instruments, we'd like to move it to the qualitative section. Ways to reflect 2.1c. We believe that that should be in the context section. This is the most aligned with Decision 9 CMA 3, paragraph 15, which includes the relationship between the NCQG and Article 2 as a whole, including 2.1c. So that's more of a context thing. On qualitative elements, we want to delete recipients. It's outside of the mandate. We want to delete the role of different actors. It's outside of the mandate. And we want to also integrate capacity building and tech transfer into thematic areas. This is these are our suggestions, targeted suggestions to the input paper. I'll close on some final points here. To be honest, we feel like we may be entering into a futile exercise, and we're happy, of course, to engage. Our group has been engaging. We've attended every single technical expert dialogue as a group. We've submitted submissions in every call. We want this process to progress as much as possible. But now we feel like we're engaging in an exercise of never-ending discussions on elements and ideas that are not relevant to what we're trying to achieve here. I want to make something clear on behalf of my group, that developing countries are not begging for money here. There are obligations that are defined in the Convention and its Paris Agreement, and we are here to clearly define those obligations. We are told every day in other rooms, in other agenda items, in every COP, that we have, as developing countries, have to be more ambitious. We need to ignore our socioeconomic realities, change structures, transform our economies, transform our societies at scale and at speed due to the urgency of climate change. However, when we look at the reality of the delivery of means of implementation and support, there is no such urgency. In fact, we've spent 3 years in this ad hoc work program discussing this issue, and not once have we heard a concrete proposal from one of our partners on what the quantum will be, even if it will be delivered by everyone in the world. We didn't hear a concrete suggestion once. We didn't hear a commitment once. It's 3 years now. Let's reflect on other examples that we see out there in the world. COVID-19 was an urgent situation. Finance was mobilized quite easily at the scale of trillions from public funds. We see earlier in this year no issue for funds to be mobilized to fuel conflicts that are causing human suffering. We see that happening quite easily through public funds, through the approval of legislative bodies. Within months, these are being decided, quantums are being put on the table, and things are happening. But we spent 3 years discussing in circles with not even one concrete proposal on the table. And so I would urge our partners to do that in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arab Group. I have on my list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more speakers. I have 7 minutes left for this session. We will close at 5.
Still have one.
See if you're watching and listening. Next on the one, Canada.
Zahir, I thought you were a watch guy. You took it off. That's the problem. You took it off.
It comes from Gabby's land. So.
Oh, well then, we never know. I just first wanted to also say, building off Australia's point about how nice it is to see so many people in pink, I think that ENB might come take a photo of us at the end of the session, so it would be nice, if it's not reason enough to stay till the end because of the invigorating conversation, it might be nice to stay for the photo. I really agree with so much of what's been said so far, and I want to highlight a couple of those points. So the LDC's mentioned how long the document is, and it's still too difficult to work with, and streamlining would help. The repetition throughout, I think a few, I know Brits raised that, a couple of others have raised that, could be streamlined as well. Some of the subtitles are confusing, that's true. Samoa, on behalf of AOSIS, highlighted the importance of lowering 1.5 degrees and the finance to get there. Totally agree with that. I agree with what my very best friend Mo said from the AGN, that it might be helpful to have submissions on what's missing at some point. And I agree with the Arab group that we need a bigger room. This is very difficult to get in here and make sure that we have enough seats for everybody, as this seems to be one of the more important items of this Bonn session. So if we could be in the plenary room, that would be great. I think maybe the point that resonated the most with me was something that both ILAC and AOSIS said, which was the point on urgency. I don't want to feel like we're wasting our time, and I don't want to feel like, we're talking in circles. The Arab group sort of mentioned talking in circles as well. So in addition to also encouraging you to streamline further, one proposal that I might make is that perhaps for the next session, or while we're still in Bonn, we can highlight some areas that we agree on and some areas that might need further work. And then on the areas that we agree on, so for example, I think everybody in the room knows that access is important and that access should be in the decision and that access needs to change. And so for those areas, gender, access, Indigenous peoples, we can already start to think about what that wording could look like in a decision text, because right now it's a bit nebulous. And then on the areas that we disagree on, I think we're talking past each other a bit, and I don't know for sure that, I think the bottom line is that we all want more finance, that public finance needs to be part of it, and then beyond the public finance, there's still going to be a gap. And so dealing with what that gap is, and how how we include it in the decision is sort of the element that's the elephant in the room. And so rather than talking past each other, maybe we can agree to have bilateral conversations and try and come back with some better understanding of each other's positions. And then when we start to tackle those sections, it might be a more productive use of the limited time that we actually have in this rectangle shape. So that's just a suggestion for a way forward, but I'm very happy to hear what the co-chairs have proposed for us when everyone's finished speaking. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Canada. Next, I have India on behalf of LMDC.
Thank you, Co-Chair. India is speaking on behalf of LMDCs, and thank you for your hard work. And starting directly with some specific inputs on streamlining. Firstly, on the urgency of action section, for the paras 60 to 69, we believe that they can be collapsed into fewer paras as they are repetitive in nature, but retaining the option, no option in the last. On the needs and priorities for paras 70 to 75 and paras 77 to 86, we believe that again these can be merged into fewer paras while retaining the core message. For instance, the NCQG needs to take care of the needs and priorities, the current needs and priorities and evolving needs as per the Dubai outcome. And the quantum of needs is in the range of 5.8 to 5.9 trillion. And also the quantum of adaptation needs as mentioned by the GST outcome. On ambition section for paras 93 to 97, we again think they can be collapsed into one para because they reflect the same objective. Coming to role of other actors, paras 117 and 18 can be merged because of the repetitions, but here we have serious concerns because we are not here to discuss the international financial architecture, and we are discussing what developed countries can contribute in order to support the developing countries. On the section multilateral goals, we believe that it is highly unbalanced. It starts from para 154 and goes up to para 213, and it is highly repetitive. It reflects elements from other sections which came previous to it and after it. So we believe that unless it is restructured, this section will remain unbalanced, and without restructuring it and shortening it, we don't think that other sections can be shortened. On outcome-oriented goal section, there is no option mentioning no option or not required, so it is missing. So for all other sections, no option is one of the paras. So I think after para 213, this should be inserted. And just to end with this, so far we are very clear, and we have been communicating very clearly that there are issues that are outside the ambit of the convention, the agreement and previous decisions, references to the contributor base, differentiation across beneficiaries, an outcome-based NCQG, top-down policy prescriptions, and a multi-layered goal. We also object to language on Article 21C as it lacks a common understanding. Based on the latest version, we have a few additional concerns, references to international financial architecture, financial regulators, risks, disclosures and standards, credit rating agencies, international regulators, etc. The reason being, again, these are not within the mandate of the UNFCCC, and what we are here is to discuss the implementation of Article 9 as a whole. That's it for now. Thank you, Co-Chair. Back to you.
Thank you very much, India. Next, I give the floor to Cuba.
Thank you, Chair. As other, I would like to thank you for the effort put in order to try to streamline the document. It's still a very lengthy document, and we consider that some similar ideas and commonalities can be meshed. On how to move forward, we consider that those paragraphs that seek to shift the burden to developing countries, among others, paragraph 53 to 56 should be deleted. Article 9 clearly establishes the differentiated obligation on the provision of financing between developed and developing countries. With NCQG as a continuation of the 100 billion annual goal. So the obligation of the developed countries have not changed, and as such, it should be reflected in the text. NCQG should be addressed in the context of poverty eradication and sustainable development, as well as equity and CDBRC as a guiding principle. Recipient-based and contributor-based are concepts that are not recognized in the Convention and the Paris Agreement, so we request to co-facilitator to stick to the agreed language. We advocate for a single goal and not a complex layer one. We would like to see, as other delegates already mentioned, we would like to see proposals on a quantum for the goal, which is very crucial if we want to advantage our negotiation. We believe that figures ranging in the $1 trillion in accordance with the evolving needs of priority of developing countries should be provided by developed countries. Regarding Article 2, 1.c, as others mentioned, we do not consider that we have to include it in this decision, taking into account that a separate process is underway to determine discussion on the same article, which is to be concluded in Belém, in Brazil. So we look forward to hearing from your views, as other delegates already mentioned, and thank you again for all the efforts.
Thank you very much, Cuba. Next, I have the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to reiterate what was said by, I think, colleagues from both the Arab Group and Canada on calls for a bigger room. I understand that even the overflow room is very full at this point, so keen to have a space where both parties and observers can engage in this important conversation. I'd also like to thank you for your efforts in reducing the length of the document. They are well received, but I have to agree with colleagues around this table that further work is required to be able to engage on substance, which is what we should all be focusing on. I would also emphasize on that point that we would like to see substance being discussed while we're at Bonn, and recognizing the urgency around that. I think this is a point that's been emphasized by a number around this table, including the G77, ILAC, and AOSIS, just to name a few. On the document itself, though, we do still see some duplication, so are keen to explore options to streamline further. And I'd echo my colleague from New Zealand on that point, that it would be good to see an updated version of the text while we are here. Some aspects of the paragraph, so I think paragraph 39 is a good example of this, outline what the NCQG outcomes should achieve. And the sentiment of these paragraphs should not be lost, but we would recommend that these are solely represented substantively. Our expectation at this stage is that no substantive options are removed off the table. Additionally, there are statements of fact within the text. Others have already raised this point, but it would be helpful to think about how these are framed so we can best interact with substantive proposals alongside this. We also see duplication across some sections, so for example on access, so it would be helpful to see these points brought together so proposals relating to policy can be seen in their entirety. And it is in the spirit of these points raised that we are also sympathetic to our colleague from the AGN's point on submissions. Building on the points around substance, I would also echo Australia and Canada on areas of commonality. The UK has previously spoken to this. Access and transparency are good examples of where we can dig into areas of commonality further, and we would be keen to do this. Options for structure of the text are also included in the document, and it would be beneficial if we could make progress on the structure of the text and proposals relating to it, understanding that there is rationale for different proposals around the table, and this would facilitate further streamlining and additional engagement with proposals, which we're keen to understand further. I'm not going to speak hugely on this, but just to re-emphasize a point raised in our last intervention as well, we do see in the preamble that there has been significant streamlining, and note that some elements do coincide with the context or objective of the goal as well. But when it comes to the mandate, the NCQG website and decision texts are clear. There is a lot of text in the preamble section which does not align with this. So we could see more streamlining here to cover the mandate as it stands its entirety, and then with additional proposals alongside that. We are concerned that this debate is overshadowing more important aspects of the goal, and there is a clear evidence base for this, so we're keen to discuss other substantive areas. I'll leave it here in your capable hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom. Next, I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for all the efforts. Kuwait aligns itself along with all the elements that was mentioned by the Arab group, Saudi Arabia and G77 and China group. We align ourselves to get a good quality financial support through a shorter, well-structured document, constructive elements that discusses the NCQG goal and has text in an effective format leading to an appropriate financial support that helps developing countries deal with the challenges that we face. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuwait. European Union, next.
Thank you very much, and good to see you all. Want to start off by saying that we do need a bigger room. I think it's very important that there is no capacity constraint, and indeed also observers can follow the discussions. Thank you, of course, co-chairs, for your continued efforts working on the input paper. And we're very happy to continue to engage constructively with the paper. But again, to reiterate what others have also said, that we see that there's still quite a bit of streamlining and to be done in terms of removing duplication. Some of the subheadings are confusing and so on. I mean, there are sort of paragraphs that could be grouped, and but at the same time, we also stress that we are not taking out any substantive options or nuances of the table, and are sometimes a bit surprised by some of the interventions asking for removing aspects related to mandates that we actually think are at the core of the work on the NCQG. We'd be very happy to engage on substance, but we still find this version somewhat difficult to navigate through. We would be very happy to give you a mandate to provide a further streamlined version of your input paper for discussions early next week, and would be happy to indeed engage on substance. And I do think that while some of the substantive elements may be difficult to make progress at our level, but certainly when it comes to access, transparency, qualitative elements, effectiveness, and so on, I do think that there would be areas of progress that we could indeed make here. And like others, we're very interested to hear your plans for the next steps. And indeed would like to get the next iteration before the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union. Next, South Africa.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Thank you, co-chair, for the opportunity. We align with the statement made by the G77 and China, the AGN and other developing country groups. Firstly, thank you for the updated document. We really appreciate the work that you've been undertaking to streamline the document and the text so far, and we do continue to be committed to the work and to collaborate closely with you on improving the text. In our view, the NCQG offers us the opportunity to link ambition and means of implementation. Calls for ambitious action needs to be met with ambitious finance. It is important that the NCQG remains focused on those areas that are easy to track and report on. The inclusion of stakeholders that are outside of the UNFCCC context will complicate the implementation of the NCQG moving forward. The NCQG is not the entirety of climate finance. Rather, it is the part that demonstrates developed countries' commitment. To meet these needs, we need to see an NCQG of at least 1.3 trillion USD of publicly mobilized finance as put forward from developing countries to meet the needs of developing countries. Similarly, the views expressed by ILAC are important to note. The NCQG is not voluntary. It is an obligation from developed countries to developing countries. We also need to start moving towards reaching clarity on the finance that will be put forward by developed countries as the provision and mobilization obligations require. In terms of the next steps on the document, we are comfortable to give you the mandate for further streamlining with the following guidelines. We would like to see more focus on the quantum as the key outcome of the NCQG. The balance between the sections and proposals need to be considered to ensure fair representation and prioritization. We need to remove or set aside those elements that are outside of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And lastly, we would also be comfortable with a streamlining of the structure of the paper to make it easier to navigate. So we do leave this in your capable hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, South Africa. Next, I have Switzerland on behalf of EIG.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I will be speaking on behalf of Switzerland, not on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group, just to clarify that. Thank you for your text. We agree with many things that were said in the room. I will not go further into streamlining. I think you got sufficient suggestions on that. Agree with AGN with regards to not wanting to have two separate texts. We really should all be engaging on the same set of texts, and we don't want to have separate tracks starting to evolve. Also agree with AGN with regards to the transparency block, and actually would appreciate if we would have, when we go into substance, hopefully at some point in this session, a better understanding of that section, because personally I do believe there's quite some commonality there. And yes, we would see the full architecture of the Paris Agreement to be, which responds to that, to be captured, so the ETF, but we also see a role of the Article 9.5, of course, it's like the ex-ante piece, so fully understand that, as well as the collective report that you've heard from us before. We do not want to go into discussions and changes of headings or subheadings. We feel that the pen is with you, you do as you feel fit. We agree with the Arab group that bringing the time frame and the quantum together makes sense. Personally, I've not heard any party or group of parties saying that they are different. There is one time frame for the full thing, so it makes sense to bring them together. We would not feel comfortable, we said that in the last session, to remove elements like contributors, specifications, or focalization of recipients, references to 21C, things like that. But we would be very much looking forward to engaging with parties on these things. And also like removing references to rating agencies and different actors and so on, because we believe they speak a lot to the enablers and disenablers that parties have mentioned. So we wouldn't want to have them being removed from the text. Having said that, we would really appreciate, happy for you to produce another iteration of text, but that we could also have a space to have a substantive conversation taking us forward. We also believe that this kind of mode of work will probably, we asked from you a text like this, we wanted to see everything on the table, we tried to streamline further, but this will not take us to where we need to be by the end of this year. So we hope that you will come forward with us with a step change going into the next meeting that we have in between now and I guess the second time we'll meet in Baku. So yeah, just to frame that we're happy to engage on the basis of this, but we don't want to go into a paragraph by paragraph conversation or anything like that, but on the actual substance that parties try to put down, we would love to also engage with others where we do see commonalities moving forward, and noting that there are big divergences. And also hearing, for example, from AOSIS, yes, we want to talk about how we can give a certain nuance within the, focusing on the most vulnerable, but also on the most ambitious. There's different aspects to it. We want to have a conversation about that and understand each other's concepts better so that the co-chairs can take the text and give us something in the next session that will take us closer to agreement as we move forward towards the CMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Next is Oman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We support and agree with all the elements mentioned by the Arab group, Russian Federation, the G77 group, and Kuwait as well. We also support the suggestion to delete para 162C, 206, and 418. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oman. Next, I have Barbados.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And we wish to align ourselves with the comments from G77 and AOSIS. Streamlining is important, but I fear the primary focus is being lost. There's a need for a simplicity and a recognition that the NCQG cannot be all things to all people. The dire needs of SIDS need to be met through grant and highly concessional public approaches. And we need to spend the little time we have on moving forward on substance. We've had a $100 billion goal that was not, when you look at it, that complex, but we had numerous interpretations from contributing parties. Yet we seem to want to go even further down that complexity path again. While we talk all around the issues, monthly temperature records across the SIDS region continue to tumble. If we are not to be seen as making a joke and a mockery of serious matters, and if we are to be taken seriously in the ways that we have stated that we want to move this process forward in this space and not let it become a political football, now is the time for all of us around the room to commit to moving forward on concrete actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbados. Just to note, Ricardo, this is the first time I haven't heard the horse. But I can promise you a black belly sheep. I was told you to tell you that, Ricardo.
Chair, at this rate, I've been promised now a black belly sheep, a goat, a pig in a saddle. So whatever it takes to get the cart moving. Those of us in the Caribbean region have a saying that goes, when you can't have a horse, you ride a cow. We're willing to ride the cow, the pig, the sheep, the goat. Whatever moves the cart. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Ricardo. But you're getting a black belly sheep. Don't worry. Next, I have Kenya.
Thank you so much, co-chairs, and we want to appreciate you for the text you've put forward. So we associate ourselves with the comments made by the G77 and the Africa Group. And we also want to acknowledge one thing that you've said, co-chairs, that you do see the opportunity that you can work further on the text. And that's very important to us because we believe that this text indeed can be worked on further. And as you do that, allow us to mention that it's indeed a deep concern, as mentioned by the Africa Group, that we are still going around the quantum, and there's no particular figure that we've had from our partners about what we expect. But good thing is that developing countries have been putting forward figures, and one of those figures is what has been put forward by the Africa Group, and also mentioned here by South Africa, that we're looking at a 1.3 trillion publicly mobilized finance goal by 2030, and that this indeed has to go into the context of putting or streamlining the text further, particularly within the structure section where you have time frame relating to the quantum. So this is one of the things we would want to see in the next iteration, that the quantum is linked to the time frame, and there's a clear articulation of what has been put forward by parties, particularly from developing countries, around the quantum and the time frame. As we also continue, we see also some opportunities to work on the transparency sections. And again, I would appreciate what Switzerland has said. We can indeed do some further work on this because there are opportunities to strengthen, including in the context of allowing us think about 9.5 communications, and indeed what comes after the 100 billion report regime, and that we would see as a potentially new collective quantified goal report, and not necessarily a biennial assessment that takes into account the 100 billion and any other thing that is counted. Co-facilitators as well, we would see that there's or there will be an opportunity for submissions to clarify further ideas and move forward, allowing parties to exchange and have substantive discussions. But it's not just at this point, but maybe after the next iteration, we might need to invite us to clarify our ideas, not necessarily add on to what we have. We feel that we've done a lot of work within the last TEDs, to be honest. And if an idea is missing, then from our side, we see that the text we have captures a lot of ideas, and we can better clarify and get to a much closer level with a text that we can engage further in Baku. And lastly, as mentioned by Arab Group and LMDCs and other developing countries, there are sections we can collapse, such as ambition. There are statements of facts that we can do away with, but maintaining the key elements around what parties view as positions, which might be reflected across the text. And importantly, this is in your hands, and we see your text as the text that we are working with, and there's no other text. We are seeing and trusting that you're leading this process, and we are happy to engage with what you come up with as the text that will get us to Baku with a decision finally. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Kenya. Next, I have Iran.
Thank you, co-chairs. My delegation aligns itself with India on behalf of the LMDC group. We saw the text. Many works still need to be done. 45 pages are on the table that have many duplications and many things that are not under the mandate of the NCQG, and they are also not aligned with commitments that have been made by developed countries under the Paris Agreement. In this regard, some paragraphs need to be deleted, including parts that do not respect the sovereignty and national circumstances of developing countries, and clearly there isn't any consensus about that. So the text needs to be streamlined based on a mutual understanding. Any section on industry in developing countries that are playing an important role in economic development and paving the way for achieving sustainable development goals, including poverty eradication, shouldn't be targeted under the NCQG, with emphasizing that this process should be non-punitive and non-intrusive process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iran. I have next Fiji.
Thank you, co-chairs. Let me present my delegation's views in support of the AOSIS submission. Co-chairs, there's always a dangerous assumption that we are living in a perfect world, which is not the case. This is an imperfect world, and there are people suffering, and those who are suffering more are people that are most vulnerable. And I would like to make that point very, very clear in our journey in this NCQG process, that there is no one size fits all. The solutions that are probably relevant to others are not relevant to us, but the solutions that are developed by us can be replicated and be useful in other situations. We know that these differences exist, no matter how much we tried to build our respective positions, but we all know that some are well endowed and some are not. And therefore, co-chairs, on this moral ground, it is important for us to build a process that incorporates all our differences, all our strengths, as a starting point or a launching block for us to move forward in this NCQG process. Fiji, as a small island developing state, is noting with concern that our submissions being put forward by our chair of AOSIS have not been fully reflected, or partially or even reflected, of our core priorities in this NCQG process. This is a concern for us, co-chairs, as you know, and through you, we are requesting a balanced and inclusive process that incorporates all our issues. That is the strength and beauty of this multilateral process, as we all know. And let us discuss and bring everything on the table so that things need to start on a common platform that everyone agrees. We're hoping that the inclusive process that will be the landmark or the hallmark of our NCQG process will drive us forward in a manner that will be acceptable and amicable to all. We don't want to be left behind. I think that message is very clear from my co-chair, from my chair. And we would like, because our islands are suffering, some of our islands are sinking, and that is the reality of the message that we would like to share with you. So, co-chairs, we look forward to your next iteration where we will make our suggestions and hope that you will be able to incorporate the suggestions, the proposals that have been put forward by my group, by my colleagues in the AOSIS chairmanship. We would like to engage with all of you in a very fair and equitable manner that recognizes our differences, that recognizes our strengths, that recognizes also the challenges that are before us. No one is an island anymore. We are all connected. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fiji. I have Iraq.
Thank you, Chair. And also thank you for your efforts to streamline the text. Iraq aligns with a statement delivered by representatives G77 and China, Africa Group, LMDC, and Arab Group. On the text, it comprises from the core elements as the following: preamble, context, structure, time frame, etc. In each element, you could find data shown in complex way, especially on structure, qualitative elements, quantified elements, and the quantitative elements. Quantified elements focus on alignment with the needs and the priorities and constitutionality. Qualified elements, I think here need more arrangement for these elements through set framework, including clear reference to the UNFCCC, principle of the Convention and Paris Agreement, urgence to support ambition and implementation, reference to the relevance of the latest science, consistent with the extreme challenge facing developing countries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Iraq. Next, I have Palau.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. At the onset, let me align myself with the comments made by our team, AOSIS. Chair, I take the floor in support of the comment made by my colleague from Fiji. And what Makai said, it seems like the SIDS are always a hostage to this. We provided a submission, and we would like to see partial, if not all of it, but partial of that submissions of the AOSIS submission, because it's not captured reflectively in this 45-page. And I will not talk about, like Gabby, I will not talk about giving you instructions, because I think, and I know that you're taking exceptional notes on how to streamline this process. The comment made from my colleague from Barbados in regards to record monthly increase. Just last year alone, we just have to keep in mind that it was the record-breaking, the hottest in all the periods since recording was made, Mr. Chair. And as I sit here, I hear other parties trying to extend a hand to compromise, let's work together, and other parties are still sticking to the red lines. But that does not do SIDS or LDCs anything. We need to move forward. And I'd just like to, in closing, just kind of remind ourselves, like, you know, in this space, our collective inability to move forward is actually putting us on a pathway towards humanity crisis, as particularly in the SIDS and LDCs. We don't have time to another 30 years, another 5 years. It's not even a matter of time of 5 years. We needed action yesterday, we need action now. And so I'd like to echo the voice made by some of our parties here that we need to start moving to substantive discussion. And then trying to bridge that understanding so we can move forward to at least by the time we get to Baku, at least we could get a decision that actually provides some sort of, not a major relief for SIDS. Because we are not in the front line, we are now living in climate crisis on our islands. Droughts, inundation, coastal erosion, farming activities have been halted, gender issues, all of these are now coming back, even to the point of mobilization right now, which is a no option. But because, again, of our inabilities to come together and work out on a system, mobilization now will have to become a reality in the next 5 years if we do not come together in this SB1 to work collectively so we could have the ability to move forward, not the inability to stop now. So with that, Chair, I would just like to close and plead with my colleagues and also with you, Chair, the AOSA submission, if not all, at least partial of it should be included in the next iteration. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Palau. Next, China.
Thank you, Zahia, or co-chair. And thank you for the update paper. I cannot imagine being in your position, handling this most important and challenging agenda item. For 45 pages, same as 63 pages. Due to the length of the document, the UN printer does not allow us to print it out. Yeah. So for next version, I would like to, with the length of the document, which UN can able to print it out. Yeah. The atmosphere in this room is so intense as the Paris Agreement negotiation. We rely on your leadership along with the deep involvement of Azerbaijan, the COP29 presidency, to help us find a feasible way forward. China aligned itself with the intervention made by Argentina on behalf of G77 China. First, I want to emphasize the clear financial responsibility of developed country as outlined in Article 4 of the Convention and Article 2, Article 9 of the Paris Agreement. This provision explicitly states the obligation of developed nations to support developing countries in climate actions. The commitment to mobilize US $100 billion per year by 2020, as initially adopted in the decision to CP15 back in 2009, has not been met 14 consecutive years. No, so I said that repeatedly every time, so I skip this part. Secondly, regarding on the mandate of our agenda item, as outlined in 1CP21, we need to stay true to the original language and the intention of the decision, which clearly state the intention of developed country to continue their obligations, their commitment to provide climate finance to developing countries. This mandate is commitment agreed upon all parties, and we must ensure that we adhere to this, to it strictly. We mandate our co-chair to consolidate the input paper by emerging redundancies. However, this should be done without removing or alter our viewpoints. Additionally, we request the co-chair to further categorize and organize the content, forming an option-based document. All paragraphs and sections should align with the principle and provision of the Convention and its Paris Agreement. We also request that all modifications by the co-chair be made using the track changes features so that we can see exactly what has been deleted or altered. Furthermore, it is important to note that the 21C is not part of the mandate for this agenda item. We understand that some developed countries wish to use this article to shift away from their financial responsibilities or portray their contributions as voluntary, which we don't agree with. We propose place all content related to Article 21C in brackets. Additionally, in terms recipient and contributions are not aligned with the language of Paris Agreement, we propose place this term in brackets and add developing country before recipient and developed country before contributions to ensure clarity and alignment with the agreed terminology. Financial resources from developed countries should be in form of grant or highly concessional finance to avoid exacerbate fiscal constraint in developing countries. However, this platform is not appropriate to venue to address that issue, as this matter neither align with the principle of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, nor fall within the mandate of this agenda item. Therefore, we request that all debt-related content be brackets. Lastly, we express our dissatisfaction with the lack of concrete quantitative information from developed countries. None have proposed quantitative commitment, nor have they agreed on consensus definition of climate finance. This demonstrates a lack of willingness to provide the necessary funding and lack of sincerity in fulfill their obligation under Paris Agreement. Furthermore, I want to request to deletion. This is quite long because even it's not my mother language. I read through all the document. We want deletion on paragraph 2, 55, 56, 95, 127, 159, 162, 164, 166, 168, 171, 303 to 308, 349, 351, 353, 361, 400, 471. And that's all. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, were you doing mahjong or? I'm just kidding, Chair. I don't know. I think you should raise the issue of the pages with the budget committee when they're looking at, so that you can print more than 63 pages. I think you go to budget, don't you? You follow budget? No? Okay. Pakistan next.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, first of all, I'd like to thank you also for the work done to shorten the document. And I'll also like to align my delegation's position with what has been said by India on behalf of the LMDC on the Africa group, the G77 group, China, the Arab group, and also the statement made by the Russian Federation. Mr. Chair, probably I think you have put us in a sort of a straitjacket by making two statements. The one statement in the beginning that you made is that you said that parties are not allowed to say whatever they have been saying before on the text. And the second statement you said that you have a plan in your heart which you've not revealed, and that puts us in a sort of a fix. But however, whatever the case is, my delegation is of the opinion that the new text that has been rolled out, adequate mention has not been made of the loss and damage issue. the finances, it talks about everything under the sun, but not about the loss and damage. I think it's a very critical area, and it's important to many of the developing countries, and it should be there in a very emphatic manner. Second, my delegation thinks that there are too many elements within the new text that are extra legal and extra constitutional to the agreement. And there's a mention of players that have no mention within the agreements. So my delegation's position is that all the extra legal and extra constitutional players should be deleted from the text. And the third section is that because finance is basically a very, simple issue and should not be entangled with all the other things under the sun. And the main idea of the new quantified goal was to for the developed countries to give us an idea as to what they are going to commit that they have not already committed. But my delegation thinks that even from the past commitments, they have not fulfilled all their commitments. And that's why we have probably failed in tackling this issue of climate change. The other important thing that my delegation would like to point out that whatever has been, put in finance in the form of climate finance so far was basically not climate finance because they were all loans. And loaning means that it's just for a developing country, it's just a deferred payment. You give them money and then you take it back with interest. So who is financing? The developing world is financing. There's nothing, there's no single dime coming from the developed world. And I think this should change within the new regime of the NCQG. As my friends from China had already mentioned, that it should be basically grant-based because it's a responsibility of the developed world in terms of the agreement. And my delegation thinks that whatever finance comes for financing climate action, it should come from the GNP and the GDP of the developed world. Thank you.
Thank you, Pakistan. Next, Maldives.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The Maldives aligns its statement with a statement made by Samoa on behalf of AOSIS, as well as the comments made by Barbados, Fiji, and Palau. It is hard to appreciate your work on the new iteration of the input paper when the views of SIDS have not been adequately input into this document. Let me echo the questions raised by Samoa and my fellow SIDS, and we would like to request further guidance from the co-chairs on the process ahead and how the views of AOSIS will be adequately reflected, noting that the AOSIS submission should be included as a distinct option on its own, and the structure of the input paper should match the structure of the decision text outlined in our submission. And apologies in advance for any printer issues this would cause.
Thank you, Maldives. And next, I have Brazil. Are you speaking on behalf of Grupo Sur?
Thank you, Chair. Let me first say that we align ourselves fully with the statement made by Argentina on behalf of the G77 plus China. We also thank you for not only for the document that you prepared to us, but also for all the meetings that you held with the different groups. I think these kind of meetings are of utmost importance for us to discuss the way forward and to have the sense on what we are, on where we are. So I hope we can keep doing this, we keep this dynamic. We can see your commitment to this process, and we are glad that you are leading us in this role. I think that today we have our first consensus, and it's a milestone that we need a larger room, so that's something. And also that the document is still too long to the point that it's unworkable and unprintable. There's a lot of repetition in the text, but I have to say that what concerns us most is not only the repetition of of similar text, but also similar ideas that could be aggregated into easy-to-read sentences. I understand that you were given a mandate to try to streamline the text, but keeping each and every nuances in the text. I think that we are in a moment where all the parties, and I'm saying that not to the coordinators, but to our fellow delegates, we believe that we should be focusing before on the main ideas, on the big values that we want on the NCQG, before getting stuck with the nuances of the text. I'm sure that will be a moment where we will have the time to enter into the details, the different nuances, the different references to paragraphs of past decisions. But I think this is the time for us to keep our focus on the main ideas. I think that one of our colleagues sometime, probably Ricardo, who has this poetic spirit, say that the NCQG would look like a Christmas tree. And we should be, at this moment, working on the branches before trying to focus this on the little balls and lights. So yes, we do agree with the idea of having another iteration of this text, a streamlined version, and we really hope that it is really streamlined, because we are eager to make real progress and to engage on the substantive matters, specifically on quantum, qualitative elements, access, and definitions. We hope that we do not get stuck on these areas that we have divergent positions, and do not make progress on those areas where we can advance at this meeting here in Bonn. We would like to make progress on whichever points of the decision that we can, and try to solve the differences that we still have on some main topics. We want a goal that it can clearly limit the concept of climate finance to grant-based and highly concessional resources provided by developed countries to developing countries in line with Article 9, and that it focuses on climate-specific activities. So we are eager to receive this new version of the text so that we can move on with the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. United States?
Yes, thanks very much, co-chairs, and appreciate not only all of your hard work on refining and continuing to streamline this document, and while I'm not convinced that you haven't just tweaked the margins, as it's quite long, it does feel like we have made a little bit of progress here. I would agree with what a lot of our colleagues have said thus far, that I'm also increasingly concerned by the pace of the progress that we're making at this stage. This feels like a minor step forward, and I am of the view that if we were going to really transform this conversation, really begin to have an honest discussion about how we are going to establish a new collective quantified goal that speaks to the needs, that is on the scale that it needs to be on in order to tackle the climate crisis and to respond to the sense of urgency that so many others have already spoken to, it's clear that we need a major step forward in this document. It's not entirely clear to me how some of the proposals I've heard thus far today are going to help us do that necessarily. As I've said several times, a number of our options are missing here as well. And I recognize that there's a high importance of making sure that submissions are reflected and taken into consideration, but I'm a little bit concerned about the integration of those, particularly as whole standalone options, would be a challenge for our process here. I'm also a little bit worried about the removal of specific substantive paragraphs or the inclusion of things in brackets with which folks don't agree. I think that's not necessarily the nature of our discussion at this moment, and while we have disagreements on the mandate here, I think the mandate is quite clear, and I don't think we should be taking out aspects that are related to substance. To just give an example, I think we've already said that we expect to see this as a CMA decision, not a COP decision, and therefore would anticipate seeing no references to the COP in the eventual decision. And if we were to take out paragraphs on the basis of our understanding of the mandate, in the preambular section alone, we would remove paragraphs 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 19. I can read a list as long or twice as long as Chow's, but rather not go through that exercise at this stage. Have also heard suggestions to remove substantive proposals related to fossil fuels and subsidies, with which I don't think we would quite agree at this stage. Have also heard proposals to remove aspects related to debt and fiscal space, which we know are highly important to a number of our colleagues and a key issue that need to be addressed in this context. So wouldn't support the removal of those either. I do think that there are some opportunities for streamlining. I think Section 3, for example, on principles is redundant with a category in the preambular section, which also refers to principles. I think it's quite easy to combine those. I liked the suggestion from our colleague from Samoa to maybe bring together the time frame and quantum aspects. I think there are clear relationships between those. There continue to be missing options that we've suggested in the past on having clear articulations of the difference between a ramp-up period and a period for the goal, and that we don't see clearly reflected as such. I think we also haven't seen a specific articulation of a goal from a floor of 100 billion, which again, we've mentioned on several occasions, which we view as the baseline for this conversation and discussion. I don't quite agree with streamlining the structure conversation with that. I think that there are numbers of structural proposals that kind of having as a distinct set to kind of understand how the linkages between the proposals that have been made and how those things hang together is quite important. And that gets at, to an extent, what I think folks are trying to see with having their submissions reflected as a whole. So I think continuing to retain the structural piece on its own helps us get at that without wholly integrating those submissions. I think with that, I'll probably stop there, but I think it's been helpful to have a constructive session on this, and I, like others, are really looking forward to getting into the substance of these conversations in the day ahead, but would request that we continue to operate in this period of a technical streamlining here, recognizing that we do need to make a significant leap forward if we're going to have the conversation we need to have to set this goal as we absolutely need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. Dominican Republic.
Thank you, co-chairs, and first of all, let me thank you and congratulate you. I don't want to be in your shoes. Also, rather than spend a lot of time making a lot of philosophy and deleting, I want to support that I think there's missing. I want to argue and support, including what AOSIS, Barbados, Fiji, Maldives, especially the last proposal of the new option that we think as a country from a small island developing state, we think that most of our necessities and arguments and wants are missing from this big text. I think if you follow our colleague from China advice, you will streamline very well the text, but I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying he's helping you, perhaps. And one last thing, just to make it sure, again, I support, especially the last, we would like to see in the new text, maybe as a standard alone option, so the group can discuss that. It will be not only 2 options, but will be perhaps 3. And since they have been talking, some fellow colleagues have been talking about husbandry, you've been talking about cattle and horses, and you mentioned, well, some people mention trees now, agronomy, but you mentioned specifically to my colleague from Barbados that you will give him a black-bellied sheep, and I believe probably 2/3 of the audience doesn't know what's a major characteristic of a black-bellied sheep from Barbados. It's a sheep a specimen that was developed. So maybe somebody can say, what's the deal about it? What's the big thing about a black-bellied sheep? Thank you.
Thank you very much, my friend from Dominican Republic. Last I have on my list is Japan.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for your dedicated work to streamline the document. I recognize that the document is yet very long and difficult to start substantive discussion. This document needs to be streamlined more to start constructive discussion based on this. But I would like to stress again that streamlining work should be technical only and not remove any existing suggestions, but streamline without losing nuances, substantive elements, and try to include everyone's ideas, because it's clearly within the mandate. We all recognize that we have to move to substantive discussion, tabling everyone's ideas to reach NCQG, which will be satisfactory for everyone, because it's important for all of us. We fully trust co-chairs to produce the shorter version of the document and help us find a way to start talking about all substantive on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. That brings me to the end of the list, and we have just about 4 minutes left for the session. So thank you very much, everybody, for your constructive inputs, your views, etc. Just to remind colleagues what I said in the beginning, we have noted that some parties and groups have made submissions. We have not ignored those submissions. We have also noted that parties have raised issues that are not in the document and requested inclusions, etc. What we had said in the beginning is that for the purposes of this meeting, we're not integrating it in the document. That does not mean we're not going to take it into consideration in terms of updating the document. Furthermore, we recognize and note that you asked for a bigger room. We will arrange with the Secretariat and most likely have the plenary, but we'll see with the room announcements. Thirdly, I'd just like to remind colleagues once again that at the end of the day, the documents that we're producing is under mine's and Fiona's responsibility. So if we produce an excellent document, you will take the credit. If we produce a bad document, you will crucify me and Fiona. That's the reality of the situation. The intention was not to straitjacket anybody. All I said is that we have heard your views before on these matters. In order to make progress in this session, we wanted to get some guidance in terms of how we can streamline it, but no party was blocked from saying anything that they would want to say in the process, and that's how Fiona and I have led the process throughout. We have embarked on the process in a participatory way and in an inclusive way, and we tend to continue doing it in that way. When we embarked on this journey, I'm reminded by a quote, an African quote that says, and we were recognized, if we go too fast, we go alone. If you want to go far, we go together. And that is our intention, to go together with you. As we said in the TEDs and before, we're on this journey collectively, all of us. So we need to take everybody with us and not just individuals. So what do we intend doing going forward? We have heard all your views. And we have also noted all the guidance that you have provided us. Fiona and I are seeking your mandate for us to apply our best effort to update the document based on the guidance that you have given us in this session. We want to present an updated document or updated document prior to our next meeting, which will take place on Monday. The next meeting is Monday between 3 to 5. There will be a notification made on the CCTVs and in the notification from the Secretariat as to the room, but we intend having a bigger room so everybody has the opportunity to be in there. For Monday and Tuesday, we've heard you loud and clear. You want to have substantive discussions, and that's the intention of doing that on Monday and Tuesday, to have those substantive discussions on matters and issues, with a view to informing the way in which we go about updating the document. So I'm not going to talk about the process between now and the next meeting, which will take place some months before, because we'd like to see what progress we make in Monday and Tuesday, because that will determine how we move forward beyond that. But rest assured, on Tuesday, we will map out the way forward from this SB16 to the next third meeting of the ad hoc work program. With that, can I take it that everybody is in agreement that we can update the document based on your guidance, a technical update? We will not amend anything. And for colleagues who've raised the issues about their submissions, we have not ignored the submissions, and that we will draw on these submissions in the process of updating. But for the purposes of now, we don't want to integrate the document at this point in time. With that, can I get everybody's agreement? I see nodding. Thank you very much, and we are almost on time, and look forward to seeing you on Monday. Unfortunately, you've given work for the Secretariat on their day off, but I note that there is a request for a photo, so I don't know what the logistics about it is, but I guess Fiona and I should just sit here, I suppose. Huh?
Don't forget to stay for the photo if you're wearing pink. We might gather up the front.